What's good, YouTube? It's me, boy Squiddy, back in another video. We are about to enter a pseudo tier 1 format, and you guys are gonna think this is crazy, but believe it or not, fire decks are getting a lot of new support. And by pseudo tier 1, I mean there's gonna be a lot of powerful fire decks that will be the decks to beat. And because these decks are so heavily favored with the cards that they're getting, just supporting generically fire, you know, the Snake Eyes stuff being generically good for level 1 fires with the original Sinful Spoil Snake Eye. And then on top of all that, we get the Promethean Princess, which is a Link 3 of epic proportions. This is easily a card that will eventually get banned. I have no question in my mind that this is a card that's gonna get banned, because it's absolutely insane what it does. It just does way too much, you know, onboard resurrection, non-targeting, in the graveyard, disruption during your opponent's turn. Does way too much. So, without further ado, I want to talk to you guys about cards that I think you should absolutely be playing for this upcoming format, at least for the start of the format after Phantom Nightmare drops, because generally in Unsolved format, when you're rushing in, we only have the OCG to look at, and we only have what little we know based on the TCG ban list, plus the cards that are getting released, to really make an accurate prediction. All of those things compounded together, right? So these are some cards that I think are absolutely going to be insane for the first week or two of the format. As the format progresses, it might change, but these are a list of cards that you should absolutely have at your disposal in your binder ready to pick up now to combat this pseudo tier 0 format. So starting at the top is Soul Release. Yes, I've talked about this card before. It actually is a decent card. This was released in Metal Raiders for over 20 years ago, and somehow this is now relevant. This card is a normal spell card that says target up to 5 cards in any graveyard, banish them. Why is this good? Well, there are a lot of interactions within the fire decks, namely Fire King, that are tucked within the graveyard, and you guys know that they have Sacred Fire King Garunix, which comes back from the graveyard when a card is popped. On their side of the field, the fire card is popped, which they can trigger very easily when they do have the Kieran in hand, which they always end in hand on the top of their combo, just off of one Snake Eye Ash. Yes, the combo is that degenerate, guys. And then on top of that, they will have Promethean Princess. This is another card that's going to be tucked away within their graveyard. This card says, if your opponent special summons a monster, you can target one fire monster on your side of the field and one monster your opponent controls, special summon this card and destroy those cards. So this is absolutely crazy. You're already dealing with the Garunix plus the Promethean Princess. Plus, on top of that, don't forget that Kieran actually has a graveyard effect that says if he's destroyed, you can actually special summon a fire monster from your graveyard and then pop a card on the field non-targeting. So we also want to get rid of any fire monsters they have in the graveyard to prevent them from bringing them back. And generally, the Fire King deck typically runs very slim lineup of the actual Fire King monsters. So we're talking like 1 or 2 of everything except for Kieran, which is typically a 3 of. The rest of the cards are generally pretty bad in that deck. So if you're actually banishing them, it means that they might not be able to play with them for the rest of the duel, which is really important. But most importantly, they're going to have 5 or 6 cards in hand at the end of this, plus the graveyard based interactions that are mostly what they're relying on to actually disrupt the opponent in terms of engine, right? Like anything else non-engine, you know, hand traps, we can't really account for that easily, but what we can account for is the cards that we can see, which is tucked away in the graveyard. Soul Release deals with that, and this is one of the cards that I think the OCG are finally trending towards because they've realized, hey, this is probably the premium-based solution going second against a deck like this. Like, you can use Super Polymerization or something to get rid of the board, sure, but they still have cards in the graveyard. We have Promethean Princess, we have Kieran in hand, we have Garunix that can come back when the Promethean Princess is popped. There are just so many ways for them to still play that Soul Release kind of makes it so you at least have a chance of winning. And this card is searchable off Thrust. We previously mentioned that in another video, but I just don't think Thrust will be that relevant because Thrust requires you to play into the board. And generally when you're playing into the Fire King board, they will be bringing stuff back with the Garunix and stuff, already triggering it. So Soul Release just loses a lot of value if you're searching it. So I personally think I'm going to side 2 or 3 of this card going second for the upcoming format because it's just the one card that deals with a lot of stuff. And targeting up to 5 cards is pretty good. I mean, that's a lot of cards to banish, right? So yes, Soul Release, guys, pick these up.
Really quickly, if you guys aren't already subscribed to the channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button at the bottom. It'll go a long way to support the channel. Other than that, thanks a lot for tuning in.
Next is PANKRATOPS, DINOWRESTLER. This card is very controversial in my opinion that it came back to 2 because it's such a powerful card going second. You're literally able to get 2-for-1 trades almost 100% of the time when you summon this card because of how big he is. He's 2600. You special summon this onto the table and you go battle phase attack, and your opponent's like, okay, I gotta interact with this, but if I do, you're gonna chain DINOWRESTLER PANKRATOPS to pop something, which is inevitable. And better yet, this card deals with a lot of floodgates in the format. Yes, I know that Rivalry goes in and their Chameleon one have disappeared, but we still have some that people have forgotten about, but we'll see soon enough, like Anti-Spell Fragments. OCG has realized that a lot of the fire decks now play a lot of spell cards. Spell cards are just the premium extenders, and they're also premium for the upcoming engines like the Snake Eyes stuff that's getting new support. And Anti-Spell Fragments deals with basically everything going first. Like it's an auto-win button if your opponent can't deal with it. So if you don't have any removal for this, you're kind of in some hot water. So PANKRATOPS not only deals with floodgates like that, it can deal with other floodgates like Summon Limit, but best of all, it also deals with monster-based, like annoying monsters. You know, like Fenrir, you might be staring down a Fenrir across the table and you're like, how can I get rid of this? Well, PANKRATOPS can swing over and then it can deal with the back roll. This card came to 2 for a reason. Konami probably realized, hey, you know, going first is a little bit favored in terms of how bad the power creep has gotten. So yeah, we'll give you guys 2 of these bad boys to try and deal with that. And hopefully going second doesn't swing too much in the favor. So this card has to be in your side deck. This format, like going second, you have to have this card. So you better prepare your side deck to have 13 cards because yes, PANKRATOPS, in my opinion, is 100% a staple. Next is a card that I think people should be playing, Called by the Grave. This card deals with a lot. It doesn't just deal with hand traps, but you're dealing with graveyard-based interactions. You're dealing with Garunex, Princess, against decks like Rescue Ace, which will still be a thing. You are dealing with a lot of their cards that activate in the graveyard as well, right? You're dealing with a Preventer, which could be annoying. Even against non-graveyard-based decks, like even sometimes against Labyrinth, if they have an Ariana in the graveyard, you can use it against that Ariana in the graveyard when they summon a second copy and try to trigger the effect, because again, Called by negates the onboard effects as well. So this card is absolutely so versatile. It's that one for a reason, guys. In fact, I think it should be banned, like realistically, but since it's not, let's play this card. It does so much right now, and I think it's absolutely a card you have to place in your deck. Next is another card, Cosmic Cyclone. This card I think has to be in your side deck. This card is so good going first and second. You can deal with a lot of floodgates like Anti-Spell Fragments we talked about, Summon Limit, and then better yet, you can deal with annoying things on the field like Fire King Island. Yes, this card actually says, if this face-up card in the field zone is sent to the graveyard or banished, destroy all monsters you control, mandatory trigger effect, which means when our opponent has a board, we can actually pop it, whether that's going first or second. Going second, sometimes the Fire King will establish the Appaloosa board instead of something like the traditional Promethean Princess into the Emblem Whale combo. So when they do have the field spell up, which they will 100% of the time, we can easily remove the Appaloosa by Cosmic Cycloning the field, and then that triggers, boom, Appaloosa says bye-bye. Yes, we have to deal with other things like Garunex in the graveyard, stuff will come back if the fire monster is blown up in the process, but Cosmic Cyclone allows you to deal with that. And then going first, you can actually trade off of the Fire King Island, allowing it to not resolve by chaining it, you know, as a response to the effect activating, right? So this card does so much. We do have other decks to deal with like Labyrinth as well. You can get rid of some annoying trap card floodgates if they're playing that, or you can just snipe like big welcome Labyrinths that they set with their furniture cards in the end phase, because a lot of people realize that, you know, sometimes they use these card effects in your end phase, so holding the Cosmic Cyclone could have some value. If they go, okay, you're ending, okay, I'll activate the effect of Torby in your end phase to set a big welcome so I can activate it on my turn, and then, you know what? We're not gonna allow that to happen. We're just gonna activate Cosmic Cyclone and banish it and get rid of the problem. So there are a lot of things you can deal with Cosmic Cyclone. This card is absolutely goated for a reason, guys. Pick up your ultimate rares. I love this card, and I think it should be in your side decks. Next is Ghost Belle. Yes, there are a lot of banishing cards in the format right now. We just talked about one of them, the counter side, Soul Release. This banishes your graveyard if you're playing a graveyard-based deck like Fire Kings. So having Ghost Belle actually turns that off because it prevents them from banishing cards. Guess what? It also works against Labyrinths. Yes, we talked about Big Welcome Labyrinth. This is a card that you absolutely want to stop. Crucially, Labyrinth are getting a rise in popularity with Maze of Millennia because we're getting Transaction Rollback, a busted card that allows them to copy a trap card effect in the graveyard. graveyard while this card's in the graveyard by banishing it. Yep, this card is annoying. You can also stop things like Runics and of course Promethean Princess from coming back, not to mention other cards that bring stuff back like Kieran as well. So there's just so much cards that you can stop from resurrecting things in the graveyard or touching things in the graveyard. DD Crow can banish your cards, so this can be used offensively as it can be defensively. You can also stop the Called by the Grave. There's just so many cards to stop, and I feel like this card is just so underrated right now that you have to slam this into your deck immediately. Next, another hand trap. I hate bringing this up, but I love Phantasmay. This card is actually really useful, especially against some Snake Eye stuff, because they're always going to Link Reable. Now, if you're playing against Fire King, it's not as good as it would seem. You don't actually get to keep the body, because at some point in their combo, they're going to resurrect something with Kieran, and then pop the Phantasmay non-targeting. But that doesn't matter, because we're drawing 2 cards, we're putting back 1, we're still at this equal amount of card advantage, and we're fixing our hand. We're putting back multiples of cards we don't want, and we're drawing into more hand traps. If you have, like, a Phantasmay potentially drawing the cards like Nibiru, that's definitely a plus. Even drawing into things like Impermanence, which were previously quite bad, now knowing that they're going to pop the Phantasmay with the Kieran effect in the graveyard means that our board's going to be cleared, so that Imperm's still going to get some value. Like, there are a lot of things that I think this card is really, really useful against. And then against the other Link decks like Rescue Ace, this card is just on fire because they're probably not going to be able to get rid of it really easily unless they go into something like an SP Little Knight, which could bait it out. But hey, it doesn't matter. If they're going to SP, they potentially could be interacting with their combos somehow, because they might have preferred to put IP onto the field and then make SP on our turn to banish something, right? So it's kind of trading with something. Again, we're not losing resources. We can choose to try and negate if we want. That's something else we could do, but they're just going to banish both cards, which is fine because we get our Phantasmay on the consecutive turn and then protects again from SP Little Knight. So yeah, just little interactions to note there with Phantasmay being a nice card. Next couple of cards are kind of debatable. I don't think they're that great, but I think, you know, they're somewhat playable. Like CROSSOUT Designator in a tier 0 format, when everyone's playing Snake Eye stuff, you can just hit their Snake Eye stuff. You know, if they're going to the Populist effect, you can just banish your own Populist and then turn off theirs for the turn. But bear in mind that does turn off yours as well. So if you're using it against certain cards, that might actually swing in your opponent's favor because it's turning it off for the rest of the turn. So just bear in mind that CROSSOUT works for both players. But I still think it's a decent card in a tier 0 format. Next is another card that I think is somewhat good, but more better off to the beginning of formats. Evenly Matched. This is the type of card that's always good at the start of a format because no one's really solved everything yet. They're kind of just getting their feet wet with the decks, and they don't really know how to build optimal boards that can play around this card. So this card kind of comes in clutch against certain Fire King boards where they're not putting up Omni Negates. Like, I don't think any deck right now just is going to put up Omni Negates. It's mostly a grinding attrition combo / mid-range deck that relies heavily on the Snake Eye stuff. So Evenly Matched does get you some value. Now, they're going to have a bunch of cards in hand and graveyard, so that's still annoying. You're gonna have to deal with that, but this is still the type of card I think it's good for the first week, the first event, and then after that people are like, oh, okay, I could just make this board and play around evenly, so there's no point playing that card. So it really depends on the timing, but I think in the first week of the format, this is still a card that's decently good. And then last but not least, we already talked about it, but going first, Anti-Spell Fragments. This card desecrates a lot of fire decks because they're all playing spell cards. Like, look how many spell cards are in the Fire King deck or even the Rescue Ace deck. Yes, there are chainables, but it doesn't really matter because it turns off their spells for the rest of the turn. And a lot of decks are still playing Pot of Prosperity as their one consistency card. So being able to shut off this is really, really important. And best of all, when we're backing it behind a board, something like a Promethean Princess in graveyard as well, then it's going to be very hard for them to get rid of the anti-spell without hard drawing a Cosmic Cyclone or potentially a DINOWRESTLER PANKRATOPS. So yeah, I think Anti-Spell is the card that needed to go on this ban list, but Konami's like, hey, you guys can try and break it one more format before we do that. So guys, start playing this card because it's really good and I really want it to get banned. So yeah, we hit 2 birds with 1 stone. That's about all I had for this video. What do you guys think? Are there any cards that we're missing that you think are going to be good for this upcoming Tier 0 format? Other than that, thanks for tuning in. We will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.